Hi, welcome to another typology interview. We have Chad, or Damon, as he's known on his channel and by his alias. How's it going, man?
Oh, great, great. How are
Yeah,
you?
doing good. So I'd like to talk about your YouTube channel and how you started that and what it's about. But maybe first, just talk about your history in typology before you started YouTube.
Well, my history of typology was that one day, well, primarily through my life, I've always been kind of I guess an outlier. I've always kind of rebelled against any kind of traditional institution, and I rebelled against many of the things that I thought were not correct.
Mm,
And whether it was in the sense of I didn't like rules being placed on me, I didn't like structure being placed on me, I didn't like any kind of element of control from a very early age. And I didn't really find a lot of people that thought like me. At least I didn't think so, right? So originally I had thought that everybody thought like me, and I thought I was just like everybody else. But then I realized there's time and time again, there was so much variance between the way that I thought and the way that other people thought. And
wow.
that really got me looking into some kind of way to identify that either A, something is critically wrong with me, or, or B, figuring out what it is that makes us different as people. And as a result, I came across some random websites that had a bunch of descriptions. And I was reading through these descriptions, and they didn't really, most of them didn't line up. And then I came across MBTI test, and I tested out as ENTJ. And it was the first thing that actually really resonated with me.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, now this is probably some Barnum effect, confirmation bias, astrological BS.
Right.
And I was like, I think anybody can do whatever it is that the hell they want to do. And I don't think we should be subjected to some kind of type description that says I'm a certain personality type. I think the one that I took years ago was like, said it was the ENTJ was the CEO personality or something like that. And I said, okay, that sounds about right. I've always been kind of a chief of running my own show. And I was leading really early. I was always creating groups, got kicked out of school multiple times for starting gangs and hierarchies and all kinds of crap
Oh,
that I
wow.
did.
Okay.
So I was trying to figure out what it was, and I looked into it more and more and started really realizing there was actually some theory behind it, and I got fascinated by the theory. And it kind of started explaining differences between me and someone else. The challenge I faced was being able to objectively analyze other people instead of just kind of wanting to throw them in a box. But there was a period that all I could think was just in four letters. I got so obsessed with it. I
So,
think that's all right. I think that's semi-true for most of us that get into it. We get pretty obsessed with it for a brief period of time, some of us longer than others, but we realize that, not everybody thinks that way, and it can come off as cult-like if we get too crazy about it. So I didn't really back off. I decided to kind of project it out there on YouTube. My original motivations on YouTube were to teach because I've always been a pretty decent teacher. So I said, you know what, I'm going to start teaching this on YouTube. And this was back when, in like 2015, when EJ was out there. He was making a lot of videos, and there was a few other people that were pretty prominent back then that kind of stopped. Dave Superpowers was one of the original people I watched,
right.
and I watched his ENTJ video. INTJs wear black shirts and are assholes. ENTJs wear nice suits and are just power. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. I was wearing suits every day just because I loved the effect that it created, right? And I was like,
Okay.
and I loved being able to have an impact. And I thought that, if you dress nice, you walk into a room and it has an immediate impact. You don't even have to open your mouth and people respect you. Now it's up to you to keep that respect or not.
Right.
But so I was like, okay, this is starting to make more sense. And then I started diving into the Jungian cognitive theory. And at which point, this is where I started getting irritated with the rest of the typology community as I started diving into functions, because it's a cluttered mess. And it's still a mess, and I still get irritated with it, but I find that I wish to make it make sense. And there are so many taxonomies that I don't think it ever will. There's people who believe in one taxonomy over another, and it
Right.
just
Yeah.
from there. So that's kind of a brief summary of some of the things that I did. I got started with the intent of teaching, and I did that for a few years, and I built up a pretty good follower base that still people watch today, which I leave
Nice.
up there. Although a lot of the things I've said are wrong, and I leave it up there because I like letting people kind of watch the whole journey.
Okay.
But it's always funny when you get a comment on an old video you posted 4 or 5 years ago, and somebody's like, "Hey, I don't like that. That's wrong." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I posted that 5 years ago." You know, like a lot has changed since then. But anyway, that's kind of the long story, semi-long story of what my history in it, at least how I started the channel.
Nice. So right away, do you still identify as ENTJ, or did you change your opinion on that? Okay.
Yes and no.
Right.
Short answer is yes. Long answer is no.
Right.
And I laugh because it depends on what you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
I mean, in the simplest way possible, I can create a taxonomy and say that ENTJs are people who like apples and don't like oranges.
Yeah.
And I can use the 4 letters, and anybody who likes apples and doesn't like oranges is an ENTJ. And I can create a whole system, divide people into 16 different types based on what fruits they like.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
And so all of a sudden, I claim ENTJ because I like apples and not oranges, then I'm an ENTJ in my system. But in someone else's, they're like, well, that's not TE or that's NI or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And so it becomes this big mess because it depends on what taxonomies somebody is using to type you. And that's where I have this huge disconnect with a lot of different people in the community, which I have religiously argued with about classification systems. It depends on what you're using to classify. So to answer the question, if we're talking about classical MBTI, the answer is yes. Jungian cognitive theory, yes.
Okay.
Classic, right? So if we're talking about what Myers-Briggs did, then yes, ENTJ seems to be the most realistic and reasonable typing for me. It's my best fit type. It's my verified type as I work through the certification course, and I still think that it's the best fit as far as that goes.
So what you were describing earlier, by not fitting in, not liking the system, all that kind of stuff that you were going through and wondering why you were different, that sounded like really EP-like to me.
Yes.
That doesn't sound EP to you? Or
it does.
Okay.
This is the complication to it, because it sounds EP-like in the objective personality system.
Right, exactly, yeah.
It sounds EP-like in the socionics system.
Right.
And whereas in the MBTI system, they don't really address that as much.
Right.
And so, again, as in socionics, I type as SLE, which is ESTP.
Uh-huh. Okay, yeah.
So, and I think that's my best fit type in socionics as far as I understand it. And I haven't seen a reasonable argument for anything else. So, but I am always open to hearing more information about that.
I would guess you were typed similar as well in OP than ESTP.
No, in OP I was actually typed TENE. So ESTJ, which I think it was done off my videos.
Right, yeah.
So, I don't know if that's 100% or not, but it sounds realistic to the extent in which I understand objective personality. I understand it anyway, so I don't think that is necessarily wrong. But I would say that upon further studying it, it's the resistance to control which I've avoided the most in my life.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It does sound very EP-like, but I'm reluctant to just throw out types now because I fight these huge uphill battles every time I switch a taxonomy or I'm talking about or addressing a different taxonomy. So I'm a bit reluctant unless I have a good understanding of what I'm talking about. I'm very open and I like hearing people's input, but as far as that goes, I don't know for sure. But TENE seems to be the most realistic. I can say that the VI part of it, which is obviously not true, but it's just coincidental, I tend to look more like TENE than TENI or even SETE or SE, whatever TI or whatever it is that I might fall under elsewhere. So
So that would put you not as a double decider and more as a double observer in the OP system. Would you identify with that as well?
Yeah, so the T and E, yeah, I would say that ultimately I am that I definitely play first, and so I do agree with that.
Uh-huh.
And play first makes the most sense for me. So I don't think any other type really fit me really well. But again, I would like to explore it further. I just haven't got around to really diving deep into it.
Right.
Maybe type correction is due based on what I know of my past and kind of what I've been through. Although I can say that I've struggled with the identity aspect of it too, the FI aspect. I don't necessarily know if that has been the entire Achilles heel my whole life, though. I don't think that has been, but again, I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It
can say,
sounds more like that control is stronger with you.
oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Control is the reason why I went into NLP work, because I was like, dude, I am so resistant to control. It's crazy. And anytime there's anybody, even the way someone speaks to me, if I feel like it's an attempt to control, you're going to get a lash out pretty hard.
Uh-huh.
Like, I'm very, I would say, aware of what attempts they're trying to control or not control. And so I still have to work through it, because sometimes I think the punishment I give in return for such attempt is overcorrection. So
Right.
sometimes I need to figure out what it is that has me so resistant to that. So I dived into NLP for that, and I found NLP to be a great help in that. Because of some of the attachments that it resorts to, rejection attachment, control attachment, that type of thing. So it really helped.
Interesting. Do you find it, do you need that tribe validation? Do you find that tribe validation is important?
So let me ask you this real quick. When you say tribe validation, I understand how Dave and Shannon have explained it over and over again, but how do you understand it? So I can answer that.
Yeah, basically just, you're always spending your time trying to get approval for what you're doing and make sure that other people are on board or agree with your thoughts, TE.
I don't know. I've always been just like, I don't really give a shit.
Right.
Like, yeah, I wish I could say that. And I talked to Shannon on the phone, and
oh,
she
really?
talked about that. Yeah. And I talked to Dave before too, and he talked about that. And there's times where I do seek that, but I seek it because there's a particular intended result. Like, for example, if you're leading a company and your people don't believe in you, then you've got a problem.
Right.
But it's not necessarily like, oh, I needed to feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. And that's where I would say that I don't feel that I do. And it's a tough call, because I really have never thought that I'd go around seeking that kind of validation.
Exactly.
And there's periods of my life, like, I like to know that I add value, but it's mainly not by people. I don't really look at people and go, did I do a good job? No, I just look at the result and go, did it do what it was supposed to do? Which is classic TE and MBTI, right? And it's TE and even socionics, which is like, did it do its intended purpose and its intended result, right? And that's where I've looked at it and go, yeah, then if it accomplished what it was that I needed to accomplish, sure. But as far as the OP style, I don't know if I need people to validate that. And I think that I haven't caught up with the latest videos, but the few videos I did, I had a hard time distinguishing between FE tribal validation and TE tribal validation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The idea is they have this one quote line sort of thing where it's like, if they like it, it works. That's FE. And if it works, they'll like it. That's TE. That's just their like little one-liner thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. Either one doesn't really resonate.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that would definitely put you as a self above tribe, at least in their system.
Yeah. And I don't know. Like I said, for me, I've always been kind of against the grain so much as far as that is concerned. Like, I feel, for example, when I was a kid, I felt like everybody was going this way and I was the one giving them the finger. Like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And I was never that guy. I was always the odd man out because I was going against him. I was like, no, here you guys go. I'm not doing that crap. So that was my biggest thing. Was even as a kid, I was kind of the lone wolf. I
Right.
just did
Yeah.
my own thing, and then if people wanted to follow, great. If they didn't, I didn't care. You
Do
know.
you spend a lot of your time watching videos, reading, doing that consume?
No, I don't
No.
do a lot. I don't. I know that I need to, and sometimes I do. But the animals that I do resonate with is play, blast, consume, then sleep.
I
It's
see.
like, and that's what Dave got me at too. Was
Oh,
that
okay. All right.
so that's the order that makes the most sense to me. Like even here in this room, I don't have a lot of people, so I do feel this when I get around more people, I get more energy. So I get a lot of energy around more people.
Uh-huh.
And so at work, for example, I work with about 30 to 40 different trainees. And as I'm training these people in these big groups, I get super energetic. It just comes out like a freaking atom bomb, the
Oh,
amount of energy I'm able to push into the environment when I have groups. But I have this cognition that I know that I'm sitting in my room in front of a computer screen. So I'm a lot more mellow at home than I am in a place where I'm surrounded by people. So there's that side of it, which I do understand. The play is my prime mode of operating, though.
how do you see your TE work as your main function, as your dominant function?
Well, as far as OP goes, we
Or
still
as
talking
far
about.
as you, no, as far as TE goes, just Jungian TE.
Okay, so if we're talking about an MBTI taxonomy, then we're talking about command, authority, being able to push rules and an agenda forward, and an objective. If we need to accomplish something, there's always a drive to move things forward.
But like, do you see that for yourself?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm
Okay.
always pushing things forward. If there's an agenda, it's going to get accomplished. And it's just do. Done is better than perfect, so keep moving.
I see.
And that's my whole mantra is like, if you move, then action is everything. And so it's about commanding that and being able to organize that environment or whatever resources I need to organize to accomplish an intended result. So that is where I very much align with TE and in classic MBTI, and where the mishap happens when we translate the socionics, action is it falls under SE.
That's
And
weird. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so action and command and authority, all that follows under SE, under socionics. So it becomes a big mess when we start doing intertype transfers. So
Right.
that's why when you ask me a question, how do you see TE? I need to know the taxonomy.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because if we're talking about SC and socionics, then we're like, oh, okay, that's why you would fall under ESTP, because yes, that is my prime, more even so than just utility, right? Because there's an aspect of TE in MBTI or Jungian functions, which is about utility, right? Which is efficiency, saving resources, minimizing expense.
Mm-hmm.
Or minimizing or conserving resources rather, and being as most efficient as possible. I would not say that I'm the most efficient person.
Yeah. So what you were describing for your TE in OP would be masculine TE play, is what you were describing.
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah, and that's kind of how I've always just people see me. Like the feedback I get from people I work with is I'm a hard ass, but I have the intention of really helping people, but I do it in a very abrasive, harsh, but truthful and transparent manner.
Interesting.
And so that's very much what I say, more of a JCF, Jungian cognitive function version of TE, which I think, honestly, the Myers-Briggs version has over-embellished TE. So I think it's given it too much weight. And whereas in OP, it might be a little more balanced, which is why I've kind of leaned away from MBTI in the recent years, because it just, to me, it's like, if you don't have TE, it's over glorified.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, I don't have TE, so I suck at life. And I don't like that approach. I think that it's why I moved into the socionics arena for quite some time, is because everything's more balanced. It's not like one function is overvalued more than another. And sure, little groups and communities have their little biases, but I just feel that it was too much for MBTI.
Right. I want to talk about your intuition a little bit. Do you like, I'm noticing that you're able to jump back and forth between all these concepts really easily.
Yeah.
Do you feel like all of these concepts, that there is this dissonance, that they should all fit into this cohesive whole, like everything should be one? Or do you think it's okay that there's different concepts and you just use whatever's useful?
So the answer to that is there should be one system, but
Right.
are all the concepts, can they all be blended? No, you're going to have to eliminate certain things. The questions that we're asking are, is it valid, which means that does it have applicability in the real world, right? And is it internally consistent?
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we're arguing over definitions and categorization, which I think is a huge mistake the community has done, is that we're arguing what is what, right? And we're trying to argue from one perspective that, oh, no, the ENTJ is the guy who likes apples. No, it's the guy who has TE. No, it's the guy who has TE and MBTI. Oh, it's the guy who has TE and socionics. And because of that, it's created a royal cluster of confusion in the entire community. So I've just studied each system so I can clearly compartmentalize each one, and I don't have any problem switching back and forth. But the systems, some of them are just wrong.
Right.
And wrong in different ways. One might be internally consistent, but it has no applicability to the real world. So why do you even use it? Yet it's so purely and 100% internally consistent. It makes sense, but is it true? Right? And then there's the others which aren't quite internally consistent, but it has a little more applicability in the real world. And I think that we eliminate things based on bias because we have this, and I say we as a typology enthusiast have a bias of using our own perspective. And we want to go, oh, this is my perspective, so this must be right, therefore I will eliminate based on that. Because I had posted a video on my channel, my Flow State channel a little while back about the different taxonomies, and one person posted on there and said, well, I've actually created a more cohesive system. And I said, great. So they took my chart, I created this chart, they took my chart and deleted the things that they thought didn't fit in. And they made it internally consistent, but then I asked the counter question, which is, why did you choose to delete the things that you deleted?
Right.
And they're like, well, I can't really explain that. I just felt like my experience. And this is what we go back to, is subjectivity.
Uh-huh.
Right? My experience dictates this or that. And it's like, okay, well, your experience doesn't mean it's absolute.
Right.
Which I think is the biggest challenge that we face, is that it's so subjective, depending on what we think is right and wrong based on applicability. And without any real empirical research, it's very difficult to say that one system is better than another. But what we look for is internal consistency. And I found that World Socionics Society's socionics was pretty internally consistent as far as I understood the theory. And I didn't see anything that was a direct internal contradiction to it. So I tend to lean on that system. I also like Dave's system because it's also pretty internally consistent from what I've been able to scope out. Now, I don't know as much. I haven't dove as deep into it, but I found that it adds up. Like if you're going to fit somewhere.
Right.
And you've got 512 different variations of type, which makes sense. And I think that's more realistic instead of saying that and I don't mean to make this bigger than what it is, but we have a grid of 16 boxes, and as in most typology sectors, and somewhere in that box, you're going to have a point, and someone of the same type is going to have a point that might be more like another type. It's not that all ENTJs are the same or all ESTPs are the same. There's going to be variation within type.
Right.
We tend to have bias because we use archetypes and thinking that a particular person fits an archetype. And therefore, if you're not like that person, you can't be that type. And I think that's a mistake.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So long answer, but yeah, so that's what I would say is there needs to be one cohesive system. I don't have the passion or enthusiasm to do that in typology. I enjoy the subject. I like arguing with people occasionally, but I'd prefer to live my life offline. And so, for me, it's like I can go on once in a while and get into these huge debates, and then I'll just disappear for 3 months. I've historically done this, and I'll keep doing it because I like my real life, So,
right.
Yeah. I don't spend too much time in these communities trying to argue. And I don't think I have the desire to fight an uphill battle against everybody's personal archetype.
Do you find that for something to be true, it has to work in the real world?
So what else is true? So if you say true, does it line up consistently? So just because it's internally consistent, we can't say that it's true or not true. And a additionally, if it has to work in the real world, then does that necessarily mean it's true either? No. I might have punched 10 people in the face, and I can say it works, it gets people to shut up, and then I can say that works. Then that 11th person I punch in the face, he punches me back and it didn't work. It doesn't necessarily mean that the hypothesis was true.
Right.
And so I think the word truth is often overused, because I don't think it defines it to be true because it works. I think that it's not, I think there are things that are universal, but I'm much more of a bigger believer in models versus just universal applicability.
Uh-huh.
So models to me make the most sense. If I can use a model and it has the most consistent results, then yeah, I'll use the model. So it has to be internally consistent.
Right. If it's internally consistent, and it doesn't have to be true, it just has to be internally consistent. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I get thrown off by the word true.
Right. Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
If it's internally consistent, okay, does that mean it's true? Like, so for example, we say 1 + 1 = 2. That's internally consistent. And it has shown empirically to be true as far as we can assign numbers to quantity of items or things or whatever it may be. Then yeah, that adds up because it fits both. It's internally consistent and it is applicable and demonstrated in the real world.
Right.
But if it 1 + 1 = 2, but then we apply that to the real world and we find out that it actually equals 3, then is it true because it's internally consistent? That word kind of just throws me off.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, true to me means it's verifiable in the real world, but it also has to be internally verifiable. Did this happen? I like to think the word of factual. Is it factual because it works? Did it actually happen? Then that's factual. But I don't like the idea of saying true because I think it's just over. It's like the word love. I mean, how many definitions do we have for that word? You know?
Uh-huh.
So I think that's why I've been thrown off by that word.
Right. Yeah. I'm just asking to try and pinpoint whether you're TE or TI, but that's more consistent with what a TE would answer that question so far from what I've seen.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, because how else would you answer it? I couldn't even understand or begin to understand how you can call something true if you don't have both sides.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, enlighten me. How would you?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than just to explain like that. But yeah, for me, like I'm lead TI. Okay. So for me, truth is like the ultimate goal of everything. Like it's the ultimate understanding, and you really want to always get to a truth. And you're always checking the truth against the outside world and to see if it works. But the fact that it doesn't have to work in the outside world for it to be true. It's just the way my cognitive function works as opposed to yours.
Okay, so
and TE will always say, well, if it doesn't match the outside world, then it can't be true. And like, that's a real disconnect with TE, I found.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can see how things can be true if they're not verified in the outside world, but if they've been proven to be false in the outside world, then how can it possibly be true?
Right. So,
and that's my question.
Yeah. So first of all, not all things have implications that they can be proven with the outside world. And then there's also many different understandings of many different, like the models, there's many different types of models. And one of them, they all verify with the outside world in some way, but which one is true? Which one is real? Which one is really explaining what's going on underneath the surface? Right. So that's what I try to get after is the model. You know, if you give me 10 models and they've all been validated in the external world, like it's been proven that it has an effect or it's real in the outside world, right? But
which one holds the most logical internal consistency, then that is what so that is what I look for. I look for internal consistency more than anything else. But let's say they all hold 100% internal consistency. They all taxonomy reality in a proper way. Yep. Which one is true? But they have contradictions between each other. Which one do you find is true, right? Yeah, and that's if they all hold internal consistency, then you find which one is true. You find which one is true by which one has the most outside effect. Right, and let's say even they have all of the same outside effect. So then you have to find out which one has the least internal consistency, and you rule that out by process of elimination. Right, and so let's say even that, they have all the same internal consistency. So then they must all be true. They must all be true, but what if they're contradicting each other? They're still true. Well, there's something that's off, something we're missing.
Right.
There's one truth. There's
There
one.
you go. There you go.
There's one. And so I'm not going to say they're all true or not true, because there is only one truth, and that is what I look for.
Right.
This is
so that's a TI. That's a TI way of thinking.
Yeah. So for me, that's what I look for in things, but that's why I don't like this whole cluster of bunch of systems. I know that some of them are wrong, but I don't have the typology colors and pride flag that I'm wearing of typology to want to go and fight that whole battle.
Right.
Like I think typology is fun, but I'm not going to go and just start dissecting these systems for 10, 15, 20 years. It's just not my game.
Yeah, I get that.
I think that it is some people's game, and I'm like more of a cheerleader for those guys. Good job, pushing forward. Like host Eric, for example, he's trying to find out what the truth is. You've got Dave trying to dig at the truth. You've got a lot of people trying to dig at the truth. But when it comes to these, I think that the fundamental question, which you just asked, is if they all are internally consistent and they all validate externally, but they're contradictory amongst each other, then only one of them can be 100% true, and something is missing.
Right.
Right. So
yeah,
that's what we need to find out.
So for me, I guess the closest concept that's related to this would be like string theory. And I'm not going to go into string theory, but like, let's say there were maybe 10 different versions of string theory and they had that exact same issue. And then all one guy did was add an extra dimension and it became M theory, and it explained all of the other string theories. So for me, like, this is sort of like what we're getting at. Like we have all of these different expressions of an underlying truth, and they're all lining up with reality, and they're all internally consistent. But there's something deeper going on that leads to these expressions, and that's what I'm thinking is more the lines of this.
So can I give you an example of that, how that works for me? So for me, it very much in the religious / spirituality side, you have a bunch of different expressions of all these religions trying to get to some underlying individual truth, right?
Okay.
And for me, I've worked with these, like how you just explained string theory, and you came up with M theory. It's like, that's what I did with religion.
Okay.
And so I spent my last 20 years doing that. And I pulled from all these different religions. You're talking from Hinduism, from Buddhism, to Islam, to any other religion, Christianity. And I pulled from them, and I started understanding what I saw as the underlying truth. And I was looking for the missing pieces, because I'm not interested in invalidating religion.
Right.
Right. But I'm interested in finding out what all these part of the world, the geography of the world, what they were trying to get to, and trying to see things from multiple perspectives to see the missing piece of all of it. And that's what I was really looking for the longest period of time. And I don't know if you'd call that TI, TE, but I can tell you that's very similar to how you defined what your pursuit of that M theory was for me. And that was just one small example. And I did the same thing in sales. I figured out, here's a model, here's another model, here's another model. And I took all the sales models and I pulled them together, and I figured out what they're all trying to get to on a psychology level. And that's how I teach a lot of my sales courses now, is combining all those other models to find that missing piece. What is it that piece is missing? So it's constant model construction for me. And I have system after system after system that I've built based on doing stuff like this with things I really, truly enjoy. I didn't do it with typology because to me it was always just a hobby.
Right.
But I do it with things that I really, truly enjoy. Like I've done it with politics, or I've done it with religion, or I've done it with other things, and digging at that underlying thing.
Yeah, so that lines up a lot with NI from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Rather than any, I don't know, depending on the taxonomy and all that.
Yeah. So like I said, for me, it's very much finding those missing pieces and trying to pull them all together in a model sense. So for me, it's always been about building systems and models. And I've done that, whether they were physical models or they were structural models or they're logical models. I've done that my whole life for the most part. I've always been pretty good at understanding how things work and why they work. And those are the two big things for me too, is understanding, like, for example, I'm a really good mechanic.
Okay.
I can take anything apart, put it back together without question. You give me anything, and that's just how I work. I can just pull it apart. Like I learned how to build my own car at 14 years old. And I started working on engines really early on. I mean, it just stuff like that. I just looked at it and I figured it out almost immediately.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know, TIT, it's all depending on the taxonomy.
No, yeah. Yeah, I get that. I'm also thinking like I do exactly what you're describing with systems and want to consolidate things into single understandings, single systems. But I'm thinking that mine are more subjectively, like more, I don't know, broad and universal, less like worried about the physical world and it working now in this moment. Mine are, and for you, I'm getting the hint, except for with the religion thing, but I'm getting the hint that you're more interested in something that works now in the application world, like in the TE physical world. Am I wrong in that?
I don't know about the TE. See the taxonomy. If we leave the terms out, I can explain.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
The physical world. I think SE. I think you're more intuitive than I am, and
okay.
I think more. I'm very much about data, details, present, mechanical, like things that are tangible. And granted, I have very abstract interest at times, for example, like religion or like sometimes conspiracy crap, or sometimes I have those kind of interests, but I would say that my knowledge on those subjects is very scattered, and I don't think I'd be able to hold up in a debate.
Right.
I don't feel very strong in those sectors, but I get very interested, and I'm more open to receiving information in those sectors.
Right.
But as far as intuition goes, I get the idea that you're talking about something physical and tangible. That to me sounds like sensing more than you would say that TE, right? Whereas TE is to me more about logic. It doesn't necessarily have to be tangible. It's rational.
I guess I was thinking more logic and for the like for the working world, for the something that actually functions. I guess NI and SE have to work together, but NI would have to bring to the SE through the TE sort of thing. And that's where I'm thinking, I know the terms are sort of confusing things, but I'm seeing a huge similarity in what you're describing between trying to consolidate things into a single system, which for me, that's NI. But I'm trying to see if you're using it with with a TI or with a TE. And for me, it's looking more like you're going to a TE direction with your NI, whereas I'm more on the TI direction, but I might be wrong.
I don't know. I don't know enough about objective personality to tell you you're wrong or you're right. See, that's the thing.
Jungian typology even. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jungian for sure. I'm pretty confident in TE and I.
Yeah. I usually default back to the Jungian definitions of things. Okay. And I find that they hold true in objective personality as well. Just there's added layers in OP. Yeah. The Jungian, a lot of, like I went back and read psychological types, and a lot of it matches really closely with OP as well.
Yeah, so I'm pretty confident in the Jungian typology of TE and I. But there's times I've questioned my own typing because I try to learn more, and I thought I might be TESI at one point because of the fact that I am very sensory oriented and physical, tangible, very realistic, time-based. I don't ever see myself with my head in my clouds. I'm not that kind of person. I'm very straight to, like, here we are today. So I've questioned the NI aspect of it quite a bit.
Right.
For a period of time. And then I went back to TE because I'm not rooted in the past. I'm not traditional. I'm none of that, obligated to this. But my history is kind of unique because I do have a history of focusing on like a warrior's code. That's like the most important thing to me, is a code, right? And I'm very much about a collective community as far as being able to, more than the individual. The individual is not important to me. It's about a community, and it's about being able to uphold, which sounds very effy in a lot of circles.
Right.
Right. And so I'm very much about sharing a value that exceeds the individual merit, which is why I'm so interested in things like Bushido or any other warrior code, like Spartan, like the Spartan culture. and things that went above and beyond individual rights and individual privileges for a stronger collective. And so there was that side too, which kind of threw me off for a little bit. And I said, maybe that's just my traditional roots, which moved me back into possibly TESI. Then I said, you know what? I don't really see this. I don't see the traditional aspect though. So I kind of moved away from that again. So, but as far as that was my only confusion. I never really challenged anything else. TE and I added up. I would say that I'm like 95% confident in ENTJ and MBTI or cognitive, Jungian cognitive functions, and 5% confident in ESTJ. I wouldn't say that there's much of a EP slant there in JCF.
What about a spectrum of values? Are you aware of a spectrum of values in the world around you?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. Are you aware of like my values or some people around you? Like, can you explain how that works for you?
Yeah. So I notice people's what they pride themselves in, what sense of integrity or what sense of honor, what sense of code they attempt to follow. Some people don't follow a code. And I think everybody has their own code. They just don't necessarily put it into words or whatever. They act a certain way. It's like a manifesto.
Right.
And so I'm able to notice that after a period of time of observing one's behavior, or kind of the psychological implications of the way they're carrying themselves or the way they're acting or that type of thing. And I attempt to honor other people's codes as long as it doesn't infringe on anyone else's code.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, but if it starts damaging a collective code that is, to me, I have deemed more worthy than an individual code, then I'm going to put a boundary up. And I want to make sure that that behavior stops because it cannot infringe on a collective.
Right.
But as far as an individual code, yeah, I'm pretty aware of what people value and don't value. And I make an attempt to respect people, even though I've always been more of a rebellious kind of person. It's kind of a dichotomous life I've been living because I do respect people, but I'm also very rebellious against it, which is interesting because I talk about the strength of a collective, which surprises me, but yet I'm rebellious against other collectives.
Uh-huh.
This is where I've always been very complicated in my own head because I'm just trying to like, okay, here's this challenge, this challenge, this challenge is very dichotomous, which has been a struggle in most typology circles because of kind of my upbringing, being raised by more of a Chinese priest in a sense.
Okay.
And then having a really bad childhood, then being raised by the priest, then being moved into the working corporate world. I kind of a blend of a lot of these different things that I've picked up over the years, which it's hard to identify exactly how for other people anyway. I kind of can make sense of it, but for other people, it's the cognition that confuses people. So people have typed me all kinds of different types.
Yeah. I'm probably going to type you a different type too, based on all this. What about your own personal code? Are you aware of your own personal code, or are you more likely to ascribe to a societal code?
Depends. My personal code is a societal code. It's just the code of warriors. It's a warrior's ethos.
I see.
Like, so I don't like, for example, I don't enjoy things that are cowardly. You know, for me, it's about honor, and you honor other people, and I don't like cowardly shit. It's just, I prefer to respect other warriors, and which is why it's like, there's certain things that are of importance to me, and honoring your opponent, for example. That's why I'm not big into public displays of promotional new age fighting like UFC. It's all trash talking and trashing the other opponent. I'm like, dude, that's not my thing. Like, it's about honoring your opponent, whether you are victorious or not, it doesn't matter. And so the ones that do stand out to me are more important. So to answer the question, I do have my own personal code that it's kind of silly and it doesn't really mean anything, but ultimately, yeah, I have my own personal code, and my girlfriend, she likes that about me, that I stick to my own personal code. But my personal code is really a code that I was told and taught. It wasn't something that I was just, I just feel this way. It's a warrior's code. Mm-hmm. And understanding that, you go, okay, that's more of a collective code, because there was a time where there was a group of people who shared the same code that I did. And it was much less about my own personal code.
Interesting. Do you find it difficult to deal, like most of the problems in your life, like your main tidal waves, your main issues? Do you find that it's more to do with people and other people, or do you find it's more to do with that control or objects and things like that?
Hmm. Okay, so I think that's a three-pronged
Yeah, it
question.
is kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so you said
Just stuck it
objects. No,
in, yeah.
I'm really good
Objects.
with objects. Yeah, don't have a problem with objects. People, yeah, they tend to be a pain in the ass at times. But to me, the biggest has always been the consistency of control. And I find control to be the challenge above all. So all in all, I've never considered myself to be an ethical type.
Uh-huh.
I don't see any validation or proof, or I've never heard anybody even type me that way. I'm very good with objects, systems, people. That's never been a challenge. So I don't think I'm an ethical type. I have not seen any case that does build me as an ethical type. Whereas I do understand that I'm a logical type. I have juggled between sensing and I have juggled between sensing and intuition. And it's like, am I really a sensing type or am I an intuition type? And I've juggled between that, not knowing for sure whether I am that or not. And I've juggled between that. And if we're talking about taxonomies, I juggle between that in socionics more than I did in MBTI. In MBTI, it was a little bit, but not so much. So my biggest tidal waves would be around the area of control more than anything else.
Mhm.
It's like right now I'm in this tangent where I'm like focused on how to liberate myself from governmental control. And I'm thinking about like what life would be like if I did not have the government in my life and how I can get off the grid and all kinds of crap. And
Right.
that's where my brain's been lately. It's like, I don't like the idea that idiots are going to dictate my future. And I don't like that idea. And so being in the US, I see what's going on politically and I just go, oh, oh yeah, I don't like that. I don't like any of it. And so I'm very libertarian in my political views.
Wow.
So the less government, the better. That's how I think. And so
Uh-huh.
I don't want anything to do with them. But yeah, it's always been about control. And I have bouts where it's stronger than others. And I don't know if I'm relapsing or I'm progressing, but either way, yeah, it's always been my pain.
What about self-control? Are you good with that?
Uh, Need to be specific. I have a lot of discipline.
Yeah, like discipline, able to stick to a task for long periods of time, doing the same thing over and over again, not getting bored.
Oh no, I get bored real easily, but I still do it anyway.
Right.
So there's a thing that but I've worked on this for years. This is why this is a complex question.
Right.
Because
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
I was trained in a old school kung fu martial arts. You're going to stand outside for 8 hours and you're going to flip a brick
Uh-huh.
and you're going to keep doing this and you're not leaving or you're going to get beat with a stick.
Right.
And for me, it was like, oh shit, I don't want to get beat with a stick. So I'm going to have to do this. But I knew what I was doing it for. And I was bored to tears. I was sweating. It was 100 degrees outside. I was hot. And I had all the excuses in the world, but it built discipline. I did this for
Right.
years. And so I'm a very disciplined individual, but a lot of it came from my training. But I get very bored very easily. But I know that if the greatest things in life come through consistency, and they are a long journey. And that's really unfortunate because I want things now. I want impact now. And I know that that's not the way to think, but it's the way that I naturally think. And so it's like I've been trained to act and operate differently, which is why I understand patience is one of the most important virtues for me because I have none. But do I have discipline? Yes. I get up at 4:30 every day, go to the gym, I work out. I do that every single day. I eat healthy. But do you think I want to eat healthy? No. I want to eat the most good tasting, high fat, high calorie foods all the time. And I have the craving and I love carbohydrates. I love everything that's bad for you. But I know that I'm aware of the compound effect, which these things compound. The decisions you make today compound, but I also learned that too. So it's challenging for a lot of people because I've self-developed in a lot of areas.
Yeah. What about planning for the future? Like I noticed we were trying to plan for this interview and it just didn't work and we were missing information all the time. Are you good at that normally or?
No.
Okay.
No. I feel like I wish I could say that because, ENTJs are known for having this vision and they're going after it. this is the crux in the whole mechanism. This is why another reason why I'm not big on MBTI is because I wouldn't say that the summary of my life has been random. Random. It's just like nothing has been consistent over the course of my life. I'm 31 years old and I thought I'd grow out of it someday, but I don't stick with things very long. My YouTube channel, I abandoned after a year and a half. And yeah, granted, I make videos here and there, but not consistent at all. Every business, I've started almost 9 businesses. I've failed all 9.
Wow.
And it's because I mentally gave up. I was just like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. It's boring. And I moved on. And my girlfriend keeps asking me, what are the plans for the future? I'm like, dude, I don't want to have this conversation. I can't even think about tomorrow. Like, so these are the things that I struggle with, which is like what's coming down the road, because I want to live now. I want to experience life now. I want to do things now. It's a lack of patience. Wow. And so that's the challenge, because I wish I could say, yes, I have a vision for the future. But the reality is I've struggled with looking for purpose in things. I find things to be trivial and meaningless. And so everything I've done at the time, it feels like the most championing the moment. And then I realized, dude, this is stupid. I don't know why I'm doing this. Never mind. This is dumb. And then I move on to something else. And so I've struggled with finding the deeper meaning behind my actions. And I've gotten to these huge battles and huge squabbles and fights and arguments. And I've fought these uphill monumentous battles because I enjoyed the action. But once I've won, I'm like, dude, I don't even want to do this anymore. I'm like, this is so stupid. I don't know why I fought this battle. So it's just the struggle that I have all the time is like, dude, I want to find something that's meaningful, but I'm unable to provide that on my own.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
cool,
that's what I struggle with. So this is why I type SLE and socionics the most, because their suggestive function is NI, which represents meaning and deeper purpose, and it's what they need someone to provide to them. Yeah. And so it's like, I need people to provide that. And as soon as somebody gives it to me, I'm like, oh, that is so great. Like, it's like, that is what I needed. That makes sense. Like, that is such a vision. Every time I've started a new job, I went up to the boss and I was like, where are we going with this? Where is this machine going? I need a vision. Give it to me. Give me the vision. Give me where we're going. I'm not going to tag dog. Just stick me on the vision. And once they give me like, this is what I want to happen, I'm like, gone. I'm like, let's move. And I'm action. I mean, this full quarter, he gave me 1 carrot to chase, and I chased it to the end, and we figured out it was the wrong carrot at the end. Wow. And this is the story of my life, right? Chasing the wrong. So like, that's also a way to control you, I see. Like, if someone gives you a vision, you're controlled. Well, when I sign up to be someone's employee, I'm
right.
Under
Yeah,
that
exactly. Yeah.
And I hate that. Don't get me wrong. I hate being an employee. But because I've failed in business so many times, it's like, you got to try again. I'm going to get back up again. But in the meantime, I have to pay my bills and survive and make a living. So I have to sign up.
Also, you'd be really good at starting companies and then passing them off and starting a new one. Like
that's exactly what I do. Yeah, I've sold 2 of those businesses because I was done. I was like passing it off. You know, I didn't want to stay in a business. I couldn't imagine myself being in the same business for 20 years. It sounds like hell. Right. You know, so I'm so easily bored. I have such a wide variety of interest. I can talk about anything, but I don't go deep into those subjects. I just know a little bit about, I'm a jackass of all trades is what I call myself. You know, I know a little bit about a lot of things, but not enough to really dive deep, which is why I like having conversations about people who are experts, because those experts, they have a lot more deep depth of knowledge than I do on certain subjects, which I find very fascinating.
Interesting. Are you craving that depth too? Is that something that you want?
I'd rather hire experts because I want to keep my interest open. It's like sometimes, I like to explore interests. I like to chase new things. I like to act. I like to, I don't really want to narrow myself down, which is a big Achilles heel. It's a control thing, right? I don't want to be, I have a commitment fear. Right. And it's like, I don't want to jump into something full steam ahead. And I'm like, dude, I'm so locked into this that I struggle, it's very hard for me to make a solid commitment to anything. And because I know myself enough to know that, dude, I'm going to get bored with this. And then I'm going to want to move on. And I wish I would have not done that, because the best results come when you stick to something.
Well, you're still young. You're still only 31, and you got a little while to grow and be able to lock yourself into things, I guess. But yeah,
right when you said that, it made me cringe though. Lock myself in. I'm like, no,
yeah.
I don't want to lock myself in. I want to be free. That's like the thing that I love the most, is being free, and being able to lead people. I've always enjoyed leading, being free, and having an impact. Sure, but it's so contradictory, because I've contradicted myself like 10 times in here, because there's an uncertainty.
You did, yeah.
I don't want to narrow myself into a certain path.
Yeah. So I don't want to misquote Jung, so I'm just going to paraphrase, but he said basically, he said this about just EP in general, like not EP, but like the irrational observer, like the irrational extroverted function, that they're chasing that freedom, and that is the prison that binds them, basically. They're trapped by that need for freedom.
Yeah, I can agree. That it's funny, because it's like I'm the least free person I know, because I'm trying to be free. It's just such it's such a pain in the ass. But I for sure align with that, because I know that my life has been just completely. My teacher, the Chinese priest I talk about, my old master, he used to say that he's like, you don't stick with anything. You never stick to anything. And he's like, you just start and then you quit, and then you start and then you quit, and then you start. And I was like, it's just so damn boring to go through the whole damn thing. Like, and I just don't have patience. I just don't. So, I mean, that's where I really align with that EP side of it.
Yeah.
And so, it gets really complicated.
Does it not get boring to like start the same thing over again and just do it all over again? Like, isn't that also like sort of
Yeah, that's why it's like every time I've started something new, it's been completely new. It's not been like kind of thing. It's like something new, like, oh, let's do e-commerce. Okay, then, oh, let's go get some VC, venture capital. Let's go do this instead. Let's go raise this. Which is why I have a lot of skills in business, because I've changed the dang thing every time. But now it's like I've kind of done everything.
Right.
And so it's like anything I do now, I'm repeating it, which is probably why I've not jumped in feet first with both.
Right.
And like, dude, I'm going to figure it out someday.
I'm sure you'll find something new. That's what you're on the lookout for.
But it's, you gotta stop the curse, you gotta stop.
Yeah. You're right, man. You're right.
It's a dang curse, man. It's like, you gotta stop. And I know that. See, that's the thing, is like, I know that you stick to something, you're going to get better results, but I don't. And I know that about myself. It's like, I don't stick to something. It's like, there are a few things that I stick to, because I know it has already generated the result that it needed to, and I knew that I needed to do it. And the downside is just so costly that I refused not to stick to it. But then there's other things like business, which is like, okay, you can get into this business, and then, you know what, that looks really fun. Like, I like the idea of augmented reality, and I like the idea of tech industry. Then I like the idea of, oh, you know what, transportation's really cool. You know what also is really cool is telecommunications, like the future of this. And I'm like, dude, how do people stick to this stuff? Like, I've been doing this for 40 years. I look at people's resumes, 40 years. What are you talking about? How do you do that?
Yeah.
I'm interested in everything. And it's like, my interests are kind of vast. So it's like, whoa, this is actually really cool. I want to get into this, or I want to do that. And the first thing I do is jump in and build a structure, then get people involved and recruit people.
What's really cool about that too is like, you're getting a lot of new skills and new concepts and new ideas that, like, later on, whenever you do something new, you'll be able to reapply them again. Like, they'll come in handy. And like, just like, I guess up until now, it's not like you wasted your life. Like, you were gathering a whole bunch of things. And so then when you do actually find that thing that you do decide to stick to, then you'll have like your whole toolbox that you're going to be able to use to succeed there. So it's kind of cool.
It's cool that you use the word gathering, because that's what I've done, which is why I think Dave put me at TENE, because I do a lot of gathering. Right. And I'm less likely to stick to something. And so it's interesting you say that, because the way I've looked at it is like, I have a giant toolbox. Yes. And like my current employer, they're like, they keep telling me, well, you're the most underutilized asset, like, you're underutilized, because they're like, anytime something breaks, go send Chad to go fix it. Go send Chad to go fix it. It's like, I've already done it. You know, like I can go talk to this department. I've done accounting, I've done marketing, I've done sales, I've done operations, I've done it all. You know, like I can just talk the talk in any department. Now, I don't know everything. Like I said, I'm not the expert, but I understand it enough to actually talk that language without.
It's good that you have that kind of job too, where they know you could do everything, but you'll never do one thing. So like, just keep them doing everything, and that's fine.
Yeah, I've always referred to myself as a generalist,
right?
Because I'm not a specialist. Yeah. And but I'm a generalist. I kind of have a good understanding of each one of those things. But specialist is, in this day and age, is because we have more of a saturated market, is where a lot of the results that people are going to get from is that market saturation, right? So specialist is where a lot of money is now. But generalist, it's why I aligned with CEO, because they run all the working parts of an organization, which you have to have a good understanding of those working parts, but you don't have to be an expert in any of them.
You have to have experts employed that can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why I've always saw myself as a CEO in training, because it's like, dude, I know where I'm supposed to be in an organization, but in order to be a CEO, there's only two ways. Number one is you grow up in a startup company and you get enough people to where you can, without self-righteously calling yourself a CEO. I can't stand the idea of a startup CEO. It annoys me. Right. It's like, or secondly, you stay with an organization long enough that you get moved into the CEO role.
Right.
I mean, you can also, but once you're there, you can be headhunted for other CEO
exactly.
positions.
Yeah. There's that. Yeah. If you've proven yourself to be a good CEO in one place, they'll take you somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, at my age, you're not going to see generally somebody growing with the company in my age being a CEO, which I totally understand that. At this point, I'm building a skill set. I'm working and I'm doing that. But I hope that someday I find the company that I am able to lock myself in at one point or another, and not as far as employee, but maybe my own company, some idea, some visionary purpose somebody can be an idea,
right.
you know?
Something that does enough things too, something that generalizes, something that doesn't.
I mean, I'm an idiot because I created a brand and I can't do it because it's so many different things, right? It's like, okay, here's how you develop yourself physically. Here's how you develop yourself mentally. Here's how you develop yourself spiritually. Here's how you develop yourself emotionally. Here's how you develop. And it's like, dude, if I don't stick to one, I'm not going to do any of this well.
Right.
And so I had to kind of pull out and go, okay, let's reassess. Let's take a step back. Let's figure out what it is that I need to do, because I'm trying to tackle way too many at one time, which I knew that I was making that mistake, and I pulled out really early, which was helpful.
Cool, Chad. Yeah, we're going like way over time, but let's just, we'll promote your YouTube channel. We'll put the link in the description it's a typology channel, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any other website, anything else you want to promote?
No, I'm good. I appreciate it though.
Thanks a lot for coming out. Have a good one.
Appreciate it. Thanks. We kind of had a little run on there, but
it's cool.
So let me ask you before we go real quick. What do you think my OP type is?
I will tell you right after I hit the stop button.
All right, great. Look forward to it.